My Hero Academia World Heroes Mission was a blast to see in theaters, giving me lots of great action, a fun plot, and pretty much satisfying everything I really wanted from it going in. However, my full thoughts on the movie obviously go well beyond that, so let's get into it. Now, the first section of this video will be spoiler-free. The movie hasn't been out for very long, and hell, some of you might be waiting until it's available outside of theaters. Anyway, the movie is overall about Deku and company fighting off an evil terrorist organization whose primary motivation revolves around the Quark Singularity Doomsday Theory that has been relevant to the manga ever since the Remedial Course arc. The main cast consists of the main trio of the show, with the additional movie original character Rhodey. Everyone watching this already knows Deku, Todoroki, and Bakugo, so I don't need to waste time on them, but Rhodey is by far the best movie original character to be a part of this franchise, and is easily one of the best parts of the movie. His personality is fun and casual, accentuated by fantastic flexible character animation with all of his movements. Just in the way he moves, you really get a sense for who he is and the kind of life he lives, which can be really hard to capture so perfectly just in animation. He also has a great little character arc of his own that really carries this movie's emotional weight, whereas the main cast of the show actually takes a bit of a backseat to this aside from Deku. I will say though that as far as movie original characters go, the impressive cast kinda stops at Rhodey. The villains of this movie are mostly lackluster, and while Fleck Turn did get some substance to his character, it wasn't really enough for him to be anything noteworthy about the film itself. Overall, the main appeal of this movie is Rhodey and the road trip style adventure he has with Deku as we see our heroes fight around the world. And it does a great job of handling that main appeal. However, I will go more into detail in the spoiler section of the video, especially in regards to my criticisms of the film. So if you don't want to be spoiled, I do recommend clicking off the video now. I guess the best way to organize this portion of the video is through the 3-act structure, so let's start with the beginning of the movie. The opening scene of the movie is actually kind of amazing. We get a really solid introduction to our main villain, and then we see him enact step 1 of his plan and release a ton of trigger into a city, making everyone lose control of their quirks, with the quirkless being saved from the wreckage. Despite not being very graphic, it's a genuinely gruesome scene that effectively tells us what these guys are about and what kind of threat they pose. We then move on to the scene of Deku and company raiding one of their bases after the attack, and while the trailer kind of baited us by only having these stealth suits be used in the first 5 minutes, I can't deny that it was a really solid action scene. In fact, so I don't end up repeating myself, the action direction in this movie is generally amazing. There is a constant use of dynamic camera shots to follow the motion of really mobile characters, and it just works insanely well. But back to the plot. Since there isn't much else to talk about with the introduction, I do just want to comment on how efficient the writing is for it. Essentially, we have two main characters, Rhodey and Deku, both going their own paths, which are about to converge. We very quickly get Rhodey's deal and his relationships before the movie uses the fact that the main trio would be doing patrol work to tie their stories together really well. The pacing isn't too fast, it's that there isn't any wasted time. We get a great chase sequence between Rhodey and Deku, and then we get a great Spider-Man inspired chase between the duo and the cops along with Barros, the bow and arrow villain that's after them. And that's really the biggest strength of this movie. I can't say that I was ever bored with it. This brings us to the road trip part of the movie in the second act. This is easily my favorite section of the movie. Rhodey and Deku have a fantastic dynamic. They just bounce off each other very well, with Rhodey's casual, aloof persona interacting with Deku's genuine niceness in a way that's just fun to watch. A good example of this is the scene where they have to take the bus and they argue about whether to do it legit or illegally. This gets even better when you get to see the scene where they're camping out and are just having a genuine conversation with each other, Rhodey shedding his persona to show real vulnerability. Rhodey's character is not only good because of his personality and development, but because of how his character perfectly utilizes one of Deku's greatest strengths as a character, his ability to facilitate change in others. This part of the movie also has a really great action set piece between the main trio, Barros and Sitaro. While some parts of it were a bit hard to follow, it was very visually impressive. With the gang now reunited at this point in the movie, this brings us to the third act, and what's probably going to be a hot take from me. I think the climax of the movie is really just okay. Let me explain. I think everything is great on a conceptual level. I love that we're seeing the main trio take on a threat as just them. I love Rhodey's whole deal of becoming more hero-like and saving his siblings in the end. And I really like how brutal the fights are. Deku gets shot up multiple times, Bakugo gets shredded up by blades, and Todoroki almost suffocates to death. The fights are also visually really cool, but the actual structure of all the fights is kind of lame. They all basically get beat up for a while until they whip out their strongest move and just win. Bakugo's fight is a little more interesting with his use of grenades and later pinning them in the wall before hitting them, but other than that, it's pretty basic. Now that isn't to say that MHA's fights are all super complex with intricate planning, but let's look at fights like Deku vs Todoroki and All Might vs All for One. They're pretty much the same thing, the characters take damage until the big moves decide it. The difference is that those fights have strong emotional cores to make up for it. At the end of the day, Fleck Turn's characterization mostly happens in this fight, and his dynamic with Deku is just okay. Then we have Leviathan, who is too hopped up on Trigger to even have a character, and Serpenter's character trait, which was to have a creepy laugh. They were really just empty obstacles for Bakugo and Todoroki to fight while Deku took on the main bad guy. I will say, I do really like the characters using Trigger as it takes advantage of the fact that their plan heavily involves it, but it doesn't mean they have to have no character. And that's what's really my issue with the movie overall. It's not that the movie is bad per se, far from it. It's just that there are areas with massive missed potential. Like, we have the whole deal with Fleck hating his quirk and his life. I actually really like the line he has about not even being able to die because of his quirk. That's a fucking awesome line that adds a lot to his character and just how that quirk would exist, but that's about the extent of what we get. We get the idea of how he hates his life because of his quirk and so considers it an illness on humanity, but that's about it. If we spent more time on the villains in the story and learned why they believe what they believe, that would be fantastic. Really, the villains and how they affect the final fights are the only issues I actually have with this movie. Everything else ranges from solid to great. But okay, I've said what I don't like, but that doesn't mean much if I can't suggest changes to remedy them. So what would I do to fix the issues I have? There are two things I can think of for this. If I were to tackle this movie myself, I would completely get rid of the mercenaries that come after Deku and instead replace them with the villains Todoroki and Bakugo fight. It doesn't have to be the ones we see in the movie because that doesn't matter. The point is presenting threats and giving them the screen time to have proper characterization. I would make it so Deku can't beat them because he got injured protecting Rhodey just like in the movie, but I would make it so that they don't get defeated before the final battles. That way, when the trio has their separate fights, we actually have a reason to care about everyone involved. The second thing I can think of to fix my issue with it is to keep the mercenaries and remove the villains that Todoroki and Bakugo fight entirely. Instead, have the trio all fight Fleck Turn together. We never see them all fight together in a 3v1 throughout the main story, so it's really a missed opportunity in my opinion. This change wouldn't make Fleck a more interesting character, but the spectacle of seeing them fight together would make up for that at least. In fact, I don't think there is a single perfect fix for the issue I have, since totally expanding on everything would bloat the movie. I just think the climax can be better, and those are some ways that I would possibly fix it if I had some control over it. Overall, I really like the movie. Rhodey is a fantastic movie original character, the action direction is great, the art looks beautiful at times, and the overall story is very solid, especially for the first 2/3 of the movie. I just think the final fights could be better. At the end of the day, I do recommend it, and am really glad I went to see it. But that's just how I feel. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below, as I'm sure at least some of you feel differently from me. So thanks for watching the video, I hope you liked it. Be sure to take care and have a good one.